This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World stocks pulled back further on Friday after the U.S. president threatened to slap new tariffs on China over the coronavirus. Nigeria announces 113 health workers have tested positive for the coronavirus, stretching the health systems. And we look at the challenges of enforcing physical distancing measures in African countries. Hello, welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa plans to roll out an $11 million COVID-19 loan scheme for struggling businesses. And the IMF approves a $3.4 billion emergency bailout for Nigeria's pandemic response. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. We begin in the United States, where the Director of National Intelligence said COVID-19 is not man-made. However, President Trump says he's seen evidence indicating the virus originated in a lab in Wuhan. Jill Gibson has more from Washington.
Well, President Trump took questions from reporters after an event at the White House, and he said he'd seen evidence that the COVID-19 virus originated in a laboratory in Wuhan in China.
And my question is, have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
He was then pressed by a reporter who asked him how he actually knew that, and President Trump said, "I can't tell you that. I'm not allowed to tell you that." This exchange came just hours after we got a statement from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence here in Washington, making it very clear about their conclusion about where this coronavirus originated. That statement said that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence concurs with the wide scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified. So that statement very different to what we're hearing from the US president. The authorities here in Washington, D.C. said that they'd recorded the highest daily number of fatalities this week. That's 19 fatalities, so just short of 20. There have been approximately 2,000 fatalities in the greater Washington area. So that's the District of Columbia, of course, as well as sections of Virginia and Maryland, the two states that border the district. Well, the restrictions here in Washington, D.C. itself are set to be lifted on the 15th of May, but many people expect that date to be pushed back due to the situation here in the district.
World stocks pulled back further on Friday after the U.S. president threatened to slap new tariffs on China over the coronavirus crisis. Donald Trump says the U.S.-China trade deal is now of secondary importance. London-listed stocks fell as data showed the UK housing market was grinding to a halt. MSCI's index of global stocks fell 0.5%. In Asia, the benchmark Nikkei index fell nearly 3%. Australian shares also dropped 5%, their most in 5 weeks. Burying COVID-19 victims remains a challenge for many countries. In the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo, mass graves have been dug as the country prepares for more deaths. Workers in the cemetery alone have hollowed out over 13,000 graves. Authorities there have also begun conducting short burial services. The country recorded 400 more COVID-19 deaths on Friday, bringing the total tally to 5,900. The number of cases stands at over 85,300. And to Nigeria now, where a total of 113 health workers have now tested positive for COVID-19, and that's according to the country's Ministry of Health. They are part of the nearly 2,000 coronavirus cases recorded in the country. Our reporter, Phil Ihaza, reports from Abuja.
Nigeria's Minister of Health, Osage Hanire, says the health workers infected with the virus are from both the public and private health facilities. Hanire added that unfortunately the medical practitioners will no longer be able to contribute their much-needed expertise to the fight against COVID-19 as a result of contracting the virus themselves until they recover. The minister had announced last week that about 40 health workers in the country had tested positive for coronavirus, and that this latest figure means that 6% of cases recorded in the country so far are medical experts. Nigerian Medical Association had warned last month that there was inadequate personal protective equipment, or PPE, for health workers across the country, posing a high risk of exposure to the virus. However, the Minister of Health stated that PPEs will be made available to health workers and warned that only experts with training in infectious diseases control are eligible to handle COVID-19 patients. He lauded the first responders for their commitment to the war against COVID-19 and stated that they will henceforth undertake refresher training at intervals. The federal government has also asked private hospitals willing to treat COVID-19 patients to register with the Health Ministry in order to ensure a similar standard of response in managing the cases of coronavirus in the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Like much of the world, Nigeria ordered schools shut in late March to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Educators had to quickly adapt to online lessons. But in areas where incomes are low and infrastructure is lacking, traditional learning is the only option.
This is Tolu Alagba's way of schooling since her school was shut because of the coronavirus. It's the closest thing to online lessons on an island with no electricity. In the Ogudu suburb of Lagos, Kesiana Onoge and her daughter are taking online classes.
Yay! Good job, bro.
But fewer than 8% of households in Nigeria have access to the internet.
Teaching them having a video chat and things like that were something we just have to quickly adapt to be able to keep the learning going on. So when the lockdown started, it was a bit challenging for us because we have to look for all means to get some devices available.
Experts say the pandemic is deepening educational disparities between rich and poor, both between countries and within them.
Many parents or many students may not be able to afford this. It's quite expensive because it involves data, involves light, involves close relationship. Most of the parents may not even know what to do with the children. They may not know at all if they are not exposed to let me say, if they are not techy enough.
Nigeria states plan to provide lessons on radio and TV. Authorities are hoping these alternative ways to educate children will help reduce the gap. Chom Hono, CGTN.
South Africa's school calendar has been adjusted to try and salvage the academic year. Students in their final year of primary or secondary school will likely return to classrooms on the 1st of June, while educators will return to work on Monday, giving them a month to prepare for resumption of classes. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
Teachers, parents and learners have been waiting with bated breath for the final details of how the doors of learning will once again be opened. Schools have been closed since late March here in South Africa when government introduced a nationwide lockdown to slow the pace of COVID-19 infections. Now, a central consideration according to the Education Ministry is that schools do not contribute to the spread of the coronavirus while ensuring that the academic year is saved. The Education Ministry is proposing that only some schools reopen on the 1st of June, but that adherence to the laws is an absolute must. The ministry also wants to ensure that it consults with all the stakeholders in the education industry.
Each province, district and school, we've agreed that they must have practical and comprehensive plans And the plans must always talk to risk profiles in the areas in which schools are located, because different areas have got different risk profiles. Uppermost in our planning is the health and safety of school communities, as I say, particularly our learners, our teachers, and the general staff working in schools.
The reopening will take place under strict conditions, including a limit of no more than 2 students per desk, and that children wear face masks during school days.
Classes will be sanitized every day before classes start. Learners' hands will be sanitized when they enter classroom. There will be limitations of movements between learners. There will be no clustering of desks. There are also guidelines around transport.
The proposed changes to the 2020 academic calendar still needs to be approved by Cabinet. Meanwhile, Higher Education Minister Richard Nta says the suspension of campus-based activities at tertiary institutions will continue. However, online classes are expected to remain.
As a result of highly uncertain and fluid social context imposed by the viral threat on every aspect of South African society, it is not possible to determine with any measure of certainty the dates when physical return to campuses for the majority of our students will be possible. Until we reach that point, every effort is now being made to put in place multiple and flexible methods of teaching and learning to support all our institutions and all our students.
Minister Nta says the only exception will be a controlled return of mainly medical students who will return under strict conditions. To ensure that everyone is familiar with the new guidelines, the Education Department will establish orientation and training programs for pupils, teachers, and other support staff in the sector. Yolisa Njambela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And in Ghana, the government has begun easing lockdown restrictions, but as cases of COVID-19 continue to increase, authorities have made it mandatory to wear face masks when out in public. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra.
Business activities are gradually picking up in the commercial hub of Accra after the government eased the COVID-19 lockdown. Edward Befi imports fabrics from China and Nigeria. He says although he can now open his shop after shutting it for weeks due to the pandemic, business is slow.
These fabrics are from the old stock we imported in December, so people are not interested in buying. We are unable to import new ones because of the border closure and flight restrictions.
Many businesses were hit hard when the government locked down parts of the country to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
People staying at home won't help anything. It won't help the situation. It's going to change to hunger virus. So with people working, maintaining the social distance, everybody is on face mask, following the directives, I think it's okay.
While the government has relaxed the lockdown, wearing face masks is now compulsory for everyone. But people are finding it difficult to practice physical distancing.
Despite easing the lockdown restrictions, Ghana's revenue generation continued to decline due to a shortfall in domestic taxes. The government says it will take 3 years for the economy to recover from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
The country's COVID-19 infections increased after the lockdown was eased, but the government says it's putting measures in place to contain the spread of the virus.
We will pursue vigorously our strategy of enhanced 3 T's, i.e. tracing and testing, to allow us to identify infected persons and isolating and treating them. It is the surest way to root out the virus.
But many people who have opened up their businesses after the lockdown still have fears of a further spread of the coronavirus. They want the government to strictly enforce social distancing at all public places. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And Tunisian authorities have announced that a gradual easing of its coronavirus lockdown will begin on Monday. The easing will be implemented in 3 stages over the next 3 months. Adnan Shawashi with the details.
The government will ease COVID-19 lockdown measures while evaluating the development of the epidemiological situation.
The targeted deconfinement plan has the same objective as the general lockdown, which is stopping the infection while introducing some flexibility. The general lockdown has had negative consequences on the economy and on social life. We urge people to abide by the new rules.
Small businesses will open, except hairdressers and beauty salons. In addition, all companies operating in the industrial sector, as well as construction and public works, will resume at 50% of their maximum operating capacities.
The organization of the plan is complicated. It's based on regional and professional factors, as well as age groups. This is how around 1.5 million people will return to working gradually and partially in specific sectors. It depends on risk evaluation and whether the sector is vital to the economy.
The service sector will resume operations during the first stage of deconfinement, as well as lawyers, accountants and private consultants. However, only 50% of financial services will resume. Members of the Tunisian public said they welcomed the new measures.
The state is taking the necessary measures to ensure the safety of all citizens, who must listen carefully and respect the prevention strategy. The targeted deconfinement shows that Tunisia is on the right track.
According to the Institute of Health and Safety, people returning to work must comply with safety measures like wearing face masks, physical distancing, and using hand sanitizers. According to the Minister of Health and the Minister in charge of structural projects, Tunisia's targeted deconfinement plan does not apply to citizens with weakened immune system, people over 65 or suffering from chronic diseases, as well as children under 15 and pregnant women. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back in our continuing series on how the outbreak has affected different segments of African society. We are focusing today on how countries are implementing physical distancing measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus. In most of Africa, physical distancing is as strange as it sounds. Communities across the continent derive joy and satisfaction in that sense of closeness in good times and in bad times. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted life, especially among populations living in informal settlements. CGTN's Leon Sienga visited Kamocha in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, for a first-hand account of how slum dwellers are coping.
Kamocha, a densely packed slum in Uganda's capital of Kampala. It is home to over 15,000 people, including Zauja Namukumbi. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, Zauja says she is aware of the advice on how to avoid contracting the coronavirus.
We have been told to wash our hands, give ourselves some distance, 4 meters from person to avoid the disease.
But there is little she can do about maintaining social distancing advice. The small spaces shared here, Zauja cannot avoid the close contacts.
I live in a small room. There is no way I can make the 4 meters they have told us. We are always near each other.
And she is not alone. With no work now, many people are instead gathering together in this tightly packed community. Social distancing here may be difficult to achieve, but there are other ways the community is teaming up to raise awareness about the crisis. The physical environment of the slum makes for easy transmission of the disease, and this slum organization Ghetto Lab is enforcing mandatory hand washing. They say it is easy to get people on the move.
They are moving like 5, 9 members, don't know that one, don't know this one. So it is a big problem, but what we have to do, we have to keep on sensitizing so that we can fight against this COVID-19.
Another group is making non-contact hand washing containers. They hope to put them at various points in this area.
If everyone can wash their hands, if everyone can have the masks, if we can have stations with hand wash, you know, if we can provide the food, the sack gardens to the lamb at Lisa Care, you know, then we can be safe in the ghetto.
Uganda has realized some progress in the fight against the coronavirus with 4 recoveries from 54 cases. The community here is not about to throw caution to the wind. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Kenya has limited social gatherings and asked the public to stay home. We asked families to share videos of how they are spending their days.
Kenya hasn't imposed a full lockdown in its fight against COVID-19, but many workplaces have closed down to enable members of the public to stay home and stay safe. And as they stay home, so Kenyans have discovered new skills, interests, and creative ways of keeping busy. In this home, school lessons start early, but now they are online. In a move to curb the spread of COVID-19, the government closed all institutions of learning and sent learners home. Now students have the option of learning online through the radio or alone from their textbooks. In another part of the city, the morning's work is done and now the fun begins. A jigsaw puzzle keeps these children's hands and minds busy for a few hours. Some have taken to cooking dishes from new recipes. After the government banned social gatherings in this estate on the outskirts of Nairobi, children attended Sunday school from the safety of their balconies. For athletes, the year's events may have been postponed or even cancelled, but the training continues. Kenya's rugby team, for example, is keen to find the best routine to stay in shape.
Our preparation at home has been different. We have tried to learn different kind of training techniques to be able to keep our fitness, just get our blood pumping and our fitness level to be at a certain level. It's not been easy to staying at home because being a sportsman, you're used to moving and using the facilities. Most of them have been closed down. So it has taken us time to just adjust to the environment and to be able to get the best of what we can do.
But it's not all rest, fun and games. Thousands of Kenyans across the country are facing job losses and declining incomes. For those depending on daily wages, work continues, albeit with safety measures in place.
I depend on my motorcycle for my daily meal. So if you tell people like me to stay at home, what will I eat?
As the world races to halt the spread of the virus, in Kenya as in other parts of the country, families are simply trying to stay afloat, to survive the virus so that one day they can thrive again. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN.
And still in Kenya, authorities are becoming increasingly frustrated by the number of people flouting coronavirus guidelines. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
Over the past month, Kenyans have woken up to headlines of the consequences of ignoring government directives on movement and social restrictions to control the spread of COVID-19. Some say with good reason. Footage has emerged of a Red Cross ambulance ferrying drunken youth home after curfew to avoid police. The firm that runs the ambulance service has taken action against the official responsible. Police have also arrested several people in bars and clubs, despite a government directive closing such establishments. Several house parties have also been broken up by authorities. In another incident, footage has emerged of Kenyans escaping from a quarantine center in broad daylight, prompting this warning from the person leading the COVID-19 response.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I am telling Kenyans. That until and unless we become self-disciplined, this disease is going to finish us.
Among guidelines issued by the government to control the spread of COVID-19 are the use of masks in public, movement restrictions, curfew from dusk to dawn, gatherings in any form or shape banned, and all bars and clubs closed.
The government will take the severest action against any individual who knowingly breach these laid down conventions and procedures, and in turn put the rest of the population at risk.
But there is evidence many Kenyans are taking heed. A spot check across the capital shows most people now wear masks. And public transport operators now offer hand sanitizer before one can board a vehicle. But there are still lapses. Many are still yet to come to terms with social distancing. The police too have come under fire for excessive use of force and corruption. The Kenyan government has warned additional restrictions could be imposed if there's a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases. And Kenyans will have only themselves to blame. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And in Burkina Faso, 12 Chinese medical experts are marking the end of their mission. They arrived 2 weeks ago to assist in the fight against the coronavirus.
At least 500 Burkinabe health workers have benefited from training by a team of Chinese health experts. The team made recommendations on protecting frontline workers, managing cases, and following up with recovered patients.
Alongside the Burkinabe experts, they were able to take stock of the situation of COVID-19 in the country, and they gave recommendations. It is truly with great satisfaction that we take this opportunity to reiterate our gratitude on behalf of the government and the people of Burkina Faso.
During our stay, which lasted 15 days, we had very fruitful exchanges with Burkinabe experts, especially in the response to COVID-19 and in other areas such as infection prevention and control, patient care, laboratory capacity, and so many other areas.
During their 2-week stay, the 12 Chinese specialists shared their expertise. They provided practices and techniques to aid their Burkinabe counterparts. This was facilitated through workshops, conferences and training, as well as visits to hospitals and treatment centers for COVID-19 patients.
I'm personally proud and satisfied with this team, which has made a significant contribution to improving the country's prevention and control system for COVID-19. They've also well-equipped health workers working on the front lines in the fight against COVID-19. They've also left their professionalism and expertise in the form of a very rich report with many recommendations and advice to better guide this fight.
The team of experts came mainly from the People's Hospital of Tianjin. They are specialists working in different fields. Burkina Faso confirmed its first coronavirus case on the 9th of March. Since then, the country has seen a rising number of cases in 9 of its 13 regions. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And here's a recap of some of the news making headlines. America's Director of National Intelligence says COVID-19 is not man-made. However, President Donald Trump claims he's seen evidence indicating the virus originated in a lab in China's city of Wuhan. Trump said this as he answered a question from a reporter at the White House. In the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo, mass graves have been dug as the country prepares for more deaths. Workers in just one cemetery said they have hollowed out over 13,000 graves. The country recorded 400 more COVID-19 deaths on Friday, bringing the total tally to 5,900. The number of cases stands at more than 85,000. Elsewhere in Nigeria, a total of 113 health workers have now tested positive for COVID-19, and that's according to the country's Ministry of Health. They are part of the nearly 2,000 coronavirus cases recorded in the country. And in Ghana, the government has begun easing lockdown restrictions. Authorities have made it mandatory to wear face masks when out in public. The country's COVID-19 infections increased after the lockdown was eased, but the government says it's putting measures in place to contain the spread of the virus. And that is a wrap up on the top stories making headlines. For now, it's over to Uche with our business headlines.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa plans to roll out an $11 million COVID-19 loan scheme for struggling businesses. And the IMF approves a $3.4 billion emergency bailout for Nigeria's pandemic response.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let us start off in South Africa. The country's central bank and national treasury are partnering with members of the Banking Association to roll out an $11 million COVID-19 loan scheme. Now, this is for businesses who are in distress because of the nationwide lockdown. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
It's effectively a government guarantee that allows the South African banks to continue honouring those obligations they have to depositors. The banks will almost act like a conduit for the National Treasury. There are some qualifying criteria. Businesses that were in good standing at the end of February is one, and with a track record of honouring their credit obligations, the second one. And they will then be considered for the scheme. It's aimed at businesses with an annual turnover of less than $16 million. And they must have been registered with the tax authorities as well. Companies must also be able to show financial distress as a direct result of the lockdown and an inability to generate revenue. We do understand that the loan has to be used for operating costs, salaries and rentals, but proof will be required of those expenses. The loans, of course, will be offered at a prime interest rate, which is currently at 8.75%, and repayments, interestingly, will only start 6 months after receiving that money. So there is some paperwork involved to gain access to those loans, but it will bring relief to those businesses that qualify. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $3.4 billion emergency financial assistance for Nigeria. The loan, to be repaid within 5 years, is the largest COVID-19 bailout allocation yet by the IMF to an African nation. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
There is some consensus that the IMF facility could not be coming at the appropriate time for Nigeria. Africa's largest economy is reeling from the collapse in oil prices and the COVID-19 pandemic. The situation has forced the government to cut its national budget and devalue its currency. A further budget cut is in the offing and possibly a further devaluation.
We are going through balance of payment difficulties. And as it stands today, our foreign reserve are depleted about $33.4 billion. And if that's a gross foreign reserve, so if you actually disaggregate the foreign reserve and take out companies of foreign portfolio investment that have been trying to go out because they can't get dollar to buy, you will actually come with a foreign reserve that is materially less than what the growth figure is.
The low foreign reserve and abysmal earnings from oil had constrained the central bank from its usually heavy intervention in the FX market, causing the depreciation of the naira beyond its devalued rate.
Foreign correspondent banks are beginning to worry about Nigeria's capacity to meet its foreign currency obligations. And therefore now insisting that Nigerian banks have to cash collateralize their letters of credit before they can be established. So that means that the international market is losing confidence in the Nigerians' capacity to meet foreign currency obligations. The value of this $3.4 billion coming from IMF is that we restore confidence among those who are doing business with Nigeria.
So I think that it is important that we shore up our reserves so that we can be sure that we're getting in our imports. I say so advisedly because I'm also aware, like I said, some more money is coming, hopefully from World Bank and ADB, which are more concessional.
Indeed, the government still plans to borrow around $2.5 billion from the World Bank and around $1 billion from the Africa Development Bank. It's also got approval from Parliament to borrow additional 850 billion naira from the domestic market.
I think that can do with budget, can support budget shortfalls and other issues they want to do locally. But I think protecting our position externally is critical because if you look at the horizon, the situation is there. Oil is still below $20. That is if you can find anybody to buy them. And that is almost close to our cost of production.
With the country on lockdown for almost 5 weeks because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's difficult to see how the government could realize its revenue projections, which makes the borrowing quite necessary.
My worry is their deployment. They must be deployed to ensure that there is the ability to generate the cash flow to pay when these debts are due.
It's a worry shared by many in this country, where government borrowing is quite unpopular. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, Algeria's government plans to gradually reopen economic and commercial activity during the coronavirus pandemic. The decision to expand the list of business sectors and commercial stores aims to mitigate and limit the impact of the crisis on their owners. There has been some mixed reaction to the government's decision to relax some of those regulations. Let's take a listen.
The reopening of markets is important to me, and I'm very happy that life has returned here. Since the start of the confinement, my family has been suffering with no income, and I was suffering financially. Today, thank God, things have started to return to normal, and despite many criticisms, I consider the decision is rational and in the best interests of those who have a very simple income.
We have been severely affected by the quarantine phase and the closure of our trade, and I have no monthly income other than this profession. Today I return to my profession, and I hope this nightmare will end soon.
I am in favor of the decision to open up the markets for certain types of trade necessary for the citizen, and not for everybody. With the distribution of medical masks, because the presence of many people in the same place in the markets and stores will bring us back to square zero, and we will have to repeat the quarantine process from the start, and this is worrying.
Well, let's shift focus now to international news. The European Central Bank says it is stepping up its efforts to cushion the economy against a record downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On Thursday, ECB President Christine Lagarde said the decline was of a magnitude and speed unprecedented in peacetime. CGTN's Ira Spitzer has more.
Europe's central bank faces a tall order. As Eurozone economies struggle to weather the coronavirus crisis, the bank is tasked with trying to bring stability.
In the current rapidly evolving economic environment, the Governing Council remains fully committed to doing everything necessary within its mandate to support all citizens of the euro area through this extremely challenging time.
As expected, the ECB didn't announce any major policy moves. It did that last month with a €750 billion increase to its bond-buying stimulus program. That program allows it to directly purchase Eurozone states' sovereign bonds. The main measures the central bank announced Thursday were the easing of terms for its emergency loan program to banks known as Teltro. It also announced the introduction of another program and another acronym, Peltro. That stands for Pandemic Emergency Longer-Term Refinancing Operations and is another way for the ECB to make sure enough money is in the right places when needed. Even with the bank's massive bond-buying program, it may be difficult to prop up hard-hit countries like Italy, making recovery more difficult and testing European unity.
Once interest rates start to move, borrowing for countries will become even more expensive in financial markets, and this discrepancy between the richer north and the poorer southern European countries widens.
Lagarde stressed that the bank is fully prepared to continue buying as many bonds as it needs to for as long as it takes. Experts say one of her challenges is to reassure nervous investors.
Put as much money on the table as possible, hoping that you don't have to use it, but that the number is so big that no one in financial markets would ever dare starting to doubt your commitment to safeguard the Eurozone.
The bank also warned that Eurozone economies could contract as much as 12% this year, depending on how the crisis plays out. For the continent, it looks like a long road ahead.
And to Beijing now, where the mandatory garbage sorting rules have taken effect on Friday. They require everyone to classify their domestic refuse into 4 categories and to raise their awareness of a greener environment. Well, new methods of garbage disposal are also being promoted in the city. Here's CGTN's Zhang Yibing reporting.
Garbage sorting is not new to people in Beijing, but a set of mandatory rules put in place on Friday will change habits in a profound way. 4 colored trash bins correspond with required categories: kitchen waste, recyclables, hazardous refuse, and residual waste. The rules are simple, but some need a bit explanation.
我今天带了点这个电池，你看应该扔在哪个回收桶里？
咱们家如果有那种纽扣电池，还有一些充电的锂电池、镍铬电池，那些属于咱们有毒有害垃圾，您可以投到咱们这个红桶里边。
应该。
Those who fail to sort trash appropriately may face fines up to 200 yuan. That amount could go up to 50,000 yuan for a work unit. A guideline was released earlier to advise residents to separate waste with bins and bags.
我们最主要的是呢，我们就是招募了我们的社区垃圾分类的。
The most important job we're doing now is hiring more volunteers to get the information out and to teach garbage sorting skills in our communities. They really wish to share their experiences.
Good ideas and practices are promoted in many communities to let people truly understand why the rules are necessary. Kitchen waste can even be processed within the community, reducing the burden of garbage treatment.
Other garbage, hazardous or recyclable will be carried away, while kitchen waste will be used as fertilizing to grow flowers.
We use black soldier flies to turn kitchen waste into organic fertilizer to improve the soil in our community, as well as grow trees and flowers, and the flies will later be fed to tilapia fish.
And the garbage separation rules play other important roles.
This is a waste treatment plant in Beijing. The workers here say the new garbage sorting measures bring them a lot of convenience.
With clearer classification, we might reduce the current processing steps from 4 to 5 to only 2. That's the biggest influence on us. Less impurities in garbage, lower cost of maintenance, as well as higher efficiencies and a smooth running operation.
Many said issuing mandatory rules is important, but the awareness for a greener environment is even more important. And Beijing is also piloting a non-waste lifestyle together with other cities in China, calling on people to first produce less waste. That will be the top priority for environmental protection in upcoming days. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, that ends today's segment. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll be taking a look at various African nations easing restrictions amid the coronavirus pandemic. Well, that is all for now in Africa Live Biz. My colleague Richard will be back after with more news for you.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Nta, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Medical workers across Africa are worried that they may infect others with COVID-19. This is because of shortages in personal protective equipment. However, an initiative in Senegal has mobilized 3D printers to make face shields.
Impression 3D. Donc on lance l'impression, dans 30 minutes après on aura la visière qui est prête. Donc après il suffit d'acheter du papier transparent qu'on trouve facilement dans les librairies. Donc on met des trous avec le perforateur et après on assemble des élastiques et on le met sur les crochets du visière. Et après on met le transparent tout autour et voilà, et la visière elle est prête.
Cette visière, ça va permettre à leurs agents de se protéger s'ils viennent au niveau du malade, et de se protéger et de ne pas devenir vecteur. Parce que le plus dangereux serait que les agents sanitaires du Sénégal deviennent vecteurs eux-mêmes de la maladie.
And we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a sneak peek at the headline. South African rugby aims to overcome challenges in future as COVID-19 wreaks havoc across the world.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome back. South African rugby looks set for major challenges in the upcoming months. With SA Rugby already cutting costs, the future appears bleak for rugby in the land of the 2019 World Champions. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
The rugby landscape in South Africa is about to change in a big way as cost-cutting measures are implemented by the sport's governing body, SA Rugby. Junior tournaments have been cancelled, while Super Rugby and the Pro 14 competitions are on hold, meaning there's no income for the unions on match days, and that will impact everyone involved in the game.
Wage cuts have been talked about across, not only rugby but across all sport. We see top football teams taking pay cuts. I think the same will happen in South Africa. We can see that South African rugby has put out a plan there to cut 700